I don't think any of us could handle it at all, so, keep on showing us all your cool moves, okay, Guy? Guy was about to say something, but I ignored him and kept the conversation going. I had to, because my instincts told me that he was going to drag me into this true dragon battle. Luckily, Guy seemed to agree with me, despite the grim look on his face as he shot me a nasty glare. Relieved, I flipped the page and brought up our next enemy. Now, Diablo, how was Zerario? To be honest, he was formidable. If I were to compare him on the basis of strength alone, I would call him stronger than Feldway. Wow, really? Yes. Feldway is the type that reacts and responds to taunting, but Zerario is a cold, seasoned warrior. Psychological warfare doesn't seem to work on him. There is nothing very interesting about his battle approach at all, but that's exactly why it will all come down to actual skill against him. Yeah. Guy nodded. Zerario isn't like Cornu or whoever. He's been strong from the very start. Pretty helpful in the fight against Ivalij the World Destroyer Dragon, too. So he's a solid opponent that's not likely to veer away from his own style too much. I guess it's the conventional wisdom in this world, too, that having a clear head is one hallmark of real strength. If someone runs away as soon as he thinks he's in a losing battle, he'll never be a threat, no matter how good he is. On the other hand, an opponent who never gives up no matter how rough things are going is a handful to deal with, because he won't let you off the hook until the very end. If Cornu was the former type, Zerario was definitely the latter. Cornu, in particular, was an excellent second-in-command, even gaining the cautious attention of Guy at one point, but his gang is all wiped out, so no point bringing him up now. Regardless, it was clear enough to me that Zerario was a threat. Then Diablo said something rather interesting. But right after Feldway reappeared, Zerario suddenly became far more monotonous in his moves. I wondered if something happened to him. So Diablo cautiously watched him a bit, then concluded that it wasn't a trap, some kind of anomaly was taking place with him. But why did this happen right after Feldway went on the move? And what were Feldway's goals there anyway? He didn't even join the fight against you, did he, Cagalli? No, he didn't. I was put under Michael's control the moment I saw Feldway, but he himself did nothing but watch the proceedings. Benimaru and I exchanged glances. If Feldway had joined the fight earlier, Cagalli would have been killed before we could make it over to her. Even Sylvia would have been in danger. But he did nothing, which was just strange. If he didn't plan to take action, why would he travel to where Cagalli was fighting in the first place? Why travel anywhere at all? I imagine he had some sort of purposes. I suppose so, yes. Also, one possibility is that our theory was correct. Guy picked up on the same thing that just occurred to me. I didn't like it very much, but this was the only real explanation. We'll need to conclude that Feldway can use ultimate dominion as well, said Diablo. Guy didn't look too happy about having his thunder stolen. What do you mean? Sylvia asked. Cagalli spent a few moments thinking. This might have reminded her of something. Then, I'm not sure you would believe me when I say this, but... Cagalli sounded a bit reluctant. She must have realized she was in a delicate position here. But Guy wouldn't let her stall any longer. We trust you, all right, Kazalim. Don't hold back on us. One look at Cagalli must have been all Guy needed to know she was the former demon lord Kazalim. Despite that, he didn't seem to care at all. He just wanted to hear Cagalli's story, and this struck me as a magnanimous gesture, coming from him. Confident as ever, aren't you, Guy? I'm not that demon lord any longer, so Cagalli is fine. With a smile, she began to haltingly speak her mind. To summarize her story, she said that she was in full control of her own mind until Feldway appeared. While she had consulted with Leon in secret about turning traitor against him. After working her way through a gauntlet of hazards, she was just about to jump into the transport magic circle when Feldway showed up. Right after that, she was immediately taken over, not even given a chance to resist. The timing was so incredibly inopportune, but all we could do was chalk it up to bad luck. Yuki had regained his own self-will by that time, she said, and if they had been able to escape into Tempest, it would have been a happy ending for all of us. These were what-ifs at this point, though, no use dwelling on them. Anyway, there was no doubt now about the close relationship between Feldway and mind domination. This lent more credence to Diablo's theory, but I was kind of loath to admit that, so I played devil's advocate. The question is how ultimate dominion is triggered, I said. It looks like Michael can transfer a certain amount of his skills to other people. Maybe he could trigger that from far away, as long as he has someone on the scene to work through. In my case, I could exercise my skills to some extent on any area I could see with my Argos surveillance magic. Doing that let me stage surprise attacks from long distances, a little trick that I'd like to keep as secret as possible, but I should have realized that if I could do that, others probably could, too. That was the reasoning behind what I said, but Guy flatly denied me. It's possible, but we're talking about a skill that interacts with people's very minds. I'd think the conditions for activating it are more stringent than that. The logic seemed sound to me. As I've mentioned, spatial transport requires that you know the positional coordinates of your destination. Once you have that, you can apply that info to trigger skills in that location, or launch a magic spell targeted there. It's easy once you know how, and now it didn't seem like such a fancy secret trick to me after all. Besides, Michael may be using more people than just Feldway as his eyes. It's kind of a wonder that Cagali was free of Michael's control at the time he gave Feldway those powers. Presumably he got more vigilant about that sort of thing once Obila betrayed him. Any use of ultimate dominion after that wouldn't rely on Feldway in the first place, but if he was going through Feldway anyway, why was that? Or is Diablo right and Feldway was just given ultimate dominion? That, or I have a theory that Michael has taken on the draconic factors of Veilgrind. If so, it would not be surprising if he had access to parallel existence. There's a chance of that, too. I had thought that Michael was just lending out a subset of his domination skills, but I didn't think he could duplicate them at full power. I can't ignore Seal's opinion, though, and, looking back, it did almost feel like I was fighting Michael himself back there. That'd certainly explain why he had access to ultimate dominion. He even had castle guard, too, so it's only natural that I couldn't land anything on him. He was only fighting me as a bluff, he didn't actually need to defend himself at all. Good thing I didn't show him any of my most secret moves. I breathed a sigh of relief. That's true, Guy, but if Feldway could use the exact same skills Michael had, wouldn't that explain things? Oh? You're saying that Michael lent Feldway his own skills? No, not that, I hate to admit it, but I mean that maybe both of them had control over the same skills. Huh? What are you talking about? Oh, wait. You mean Veilgrind's parallel existence? That's Guy for you, always so quickly picking up on what I'm trying to say. He and I both winced at this unwelcome theory. It would be nice if I was wrong, I thought, but I was pretty sure I was right about this. At least we weren't all mind-dominated at the same time. That's a silver lining. The fact that domination doesn't work on everyone simultaneously was evident from the time gap between Zerario getting mind-dominated and the same thing happening to Leon and Cagali. There's a limited range this skill can work within, you could say, and not just in terms of inside or outside the castle. Pico and Gasha, isolated from the outside world by their igloo, were dominated anew only much later, a clear piece of evidence. And whether the igloo played a role in that or not, this was invaluable information to us. It pretty much confirmed that the mind control couldn't work without some kind of way for the target to pick up on it. Yeah. I don't much like Rain shirking their duties, but this is more than enough to make up for that. We now know that you need to directly see and recognize your target in order to dominate it. Guy agreed with me, but he didn't sound thrilled about it. Rain's reputation was being quickly repaired now, which I'm sure he wasn't the greatest fan of. Either way, though, we now had a more proper knowledge of our enemy. I'm not keeping up with any of this. Sylvia had reservedly put her hand up, so I gave her a quick rundown. Elmesia was sharp as a tack, but Sylvia didn't seem quite as intelligent to me, or maybe it's mean of me to compare them in the first place. Leon's knight captains in attendance seemed similarly lost, and besides, it was pretty hard to wrap your head around this topic at all unless you possessed an ultimate skill. Elmesia was the emperor of an entire country, so it's a given she'd be more skilled than her mother with this stuff. Sylvia was the more powerful of the two, but Elmesia outclassed her in intuition and adaptivity, to say nothing of her political abilities. Both of their roles were pretty distinct from each other. So I explained matters to Sylvia and the knights, ensuring we were all on the same page. It looked like Michael was duplicating his skills and giving them to Feldway, so there was effectively no way to defeat Feldway unless we could break through his castle guard. He also had control over domination-type skills, ultimate dominion included, so no one but an ultimate skill owner could compete with him. That very much limited the pool of people who could take him or Michael on. But, well, it's not all bad news, either. Oh? None of my attacks worked on Feldway, but at least I know why now. That makes me feel a lot better. Plus, Vielgrind told me that skill is powered by the energy of those loyal to the skill user. When Ludora was using it, he was pretty much invincible as long as his imperial subjects were loyal to him, but Feldway doesn't have any of that. No, it's probably the mystics powering it for him, so I feel a lot less guilty about potentially having to do them in. Killing innocent imperial subjects was, for me, a non-starter. I mean, if that was really the only way, I'd have to do some needs of the many, needs of the few mental gymnastics in my mind, but even if I fully resolved to do it, I doubt I ever could have gone through with the deed. I was bluffing a lot around Michael, but I don't think I could actually do anything like that. The mystics, on the other hand, were invaders, likely ready to sacrifice their lives for the cause. Resisting them with all our might was the polite thing to do, and it wouldn't hurt my conscience at all, either. But being so straight with those thoughts made Guy roll his eyes at me. Huh? You're still being that naive, huh? It's in character for you, yeah, but if you keep overthinking everything, it's you who'll die. I appreciated that friendly advice, at least. He can be kind to his friends that way. Now that we had discussed our primary enemies, there was one person left to tackle. So who was that Jahil guy? The bastard I was fighting? Benimaru chimed in. To tell you the truth, I like to think I'm pretty strong by now, but that bum was shockingly powerful. I was able to survive him mainly because we share the same fire attribute. He was always so enthusiastic and dominating in a fight, but here he was, praising his enemy. Although it wasn't really praise, it was a cold analysis of Jahil's strength. It's rare of you to honestly admit defeat like that, Benimaru. I didn't lose, though. All I'm saying is that I won't go on record saying I'll win next time yet. I wasn't sure there was much of a difference, but it's nice to see that Benimaru hadn't lost his confidence. But given the fourfold difference in EP, outclassing Jahil in battle skill just wouldn't be enough. Benimaru's gone through a ton of training to reach his current level, so I wouldn't expect any more rapid growth from here. For certain, he was gonna keep standing up to him until he truly admitted defeat in his heart. I'd need to be sure he doesn't try anything too reckless. Well said. That's the spirit. Guy always did like Benimaru, I guess. Then Guy nodded, remembering something. Oh? Come to think of it, what was the name of that bastard who summoned me? Misery and Rain stepped up to answer. It was a man who called himself the Sorceress Dinas Jahil, leader of the Supreme Magic Empire. Yes, a high human created by that freak, that is, the demigod. I believe that demigod classified him as a failure due to certain mental deficiencies. This is the man who summoned Guy and got killed long ago. He had been mentioned in assorted grimoires and history books I read. His name didn't come up in anything published in Englisher, but he was a pretty infamous man, this fool who unleashed the worst demon possible on the world. We're talking primals like Guy and Diablo, of course, so maybe it's no wonder that Elmesia and Gazelle were so wary of him at first. No point worrying about that now, though. That worst demon possible was on our side anyway. So if that fool's name was Jahil, that could hardly be a coincidence, right? As I thought that, Kagali mentioned something surprising. It couldn't be. That Jahil was definitely my father. Jahil had lost his body and become a wandering soul, and that was when Feldway took him under his wing and implanted him into the body of Footman. The conversation we had made it clear that he was Kagali's dad anyway. But Sylvia wasn't so sure. No, that doesn't make sense. He saw me as his colleague. He was the first high disciple of the demigod, and I was the third. Luminous was the second, by the way. Apparently Jahil was at the top of the high human race created by the demigod. Luminous, for her part, was the creator of the vampire race. Would that make Sylvia the first of the high elf race? There were other disciples like this, I heard, but they weren't confirmed to exist at this point. Like Jahil himself, they vanished into history. Incidentally, Grand Dwago, Garzel's grandfather and the first heroic king of the dwarves, was a sort of throwback to the age of the original high dwarves, having inherited quite a lot of their blood. He was also a friend of Sylvia's. It's funny how people from long-lived species could have all these historical figures as acquaintances, isn't it? Sylvia and Guy are like living witnesses to history, and I doubt they were getting this wrong at all. Huh? But that's just strange. My father was unmistakably a high elf. Kagali sounded puzzled, but she understood that people weren't buying her story too much. She was racking her brain, trying to figure out the cause of this discrepancy, but the two of us reached the answer at the same time. He was taken over by Jahil, right? I said. Well, he was a bastard that way, Guy added. No wonder Rain and Misery couldn't get rid of him. What a lot of trouble that caused us. We all agreed with this, and that seemed to confirm Jahil's true identity. So my father is. Kagali leaned back in her chair. I wasn't sure what to say to her, so we decided to just leave her be for now. That night, Guy and I were having a drink in another room. The sake we were having was actually being served up from my stomach storage. Guy demanded a sample or two of the bottles Rain and the gang enjoyed back at their little party, and he wouldn't shut up about it, so I relented. I really wish he would get out of my hair like that, but it's not like I can say no to him. Trying to stick to my guns with Guy just led to a lot of exhausting hassle, so I just gave in and had him owe me a favor. Rain and Misery joined us in this tasting, as were Diablo and Benimaru. Sylvia was there too, and with that group, our late-night tryst began to roll along. What were we going to do with Leon's domain now that he was gone? That's what we were discussing here. Our daytime talks had given us some idea of the enemy's strength, so we needed to go back over our future plans. The town was fortunately not all that damaged, but Leon's castle was a huge mess, and many people were now without homes. Not having anywhere to receive evacuees was a problem. The consensus of the knight captains was to stay local and rebuild the town and its castle, but if aggressors targeted this land, they'd have trouble coping by themselves. They didn't have enough forces to counter an attack like that, and they'd be helpless to prevent being overrun in short order. Such an invasion might be unlikely now that Leon's gone, but doing nothing seemed like a bad idea to me. If they want to stay, opined Guy, why not let them do what they want? I disagreed, but saying that would be too dangerous. There's no use speaking in ideals, Sylvia added. You could ask Elle, but I don't think there's anywhere in Thalion that'd take them. The total population of Leon's domain was just under 20 million. Trying to feed this many people at once wasn't exactly realistic. Maybe we could keep it going for a few days, but not indefinitely. Being sheltered without any work to do would put a psychological strain on the people of El Dorado, too. Being away from your job for too long would make anyone uneasy. No one really needed to point it out, therefore, that evacuating the whole nation was impossible, but should we really devote personnel to protecting them here? By the way, Guy, you're not going to stay here, are you? Oh? I don't mind if I do. Yeah, I didn't think you. Wait, what? What do you mean? What choice do we have? El Dorado is a pretty low priority for them now, but you never know. Maybe they'll try attacking us to blow off some steam. Eesh. Are you kidding me? I never thought Guy would so readily agree to this, so I wasn't sure how to respond at first. Wow. Here's Rouge, the cruel, cold-hearted despot, and it turns out he's one of the most sensible demons out there. Sylvia must have heard the rumors, but Guy had just disproved them all. I was just as surprised. Look, are you guys trying to pick a fight with me, or? Oh, no, no. Why would I do that? There's no way I'd win one. Or, don't be that way, Guy. We're relying on you here. He glared at us. Sylvia and I looked at each other, then attempted to assuage him with a smile in unison. So our concerns about who'd defend Leon's domain were no longer. Then Cagali showed up. Oh, Cagali. Feeling better? Yes. It was so long ago that I don't remember all the details anyway. It'd be a waste of energy to get all emotional about it now. She was clearly just putting on a strong front. Maizeri thoughtfully set up a seat for her. She sat down, thanking her. So did you want to talk about something? Guy asked. His ability to be so direct like that is a strength, I think. I just thought that I'd tell you everything I know, Cagali replied with a wry smile. She looked much more refreshed than before, like she had just blown off some steam, as she warned us that this talk would probably take a while. She had given some snippets of it earlier in the day, but I'm sure a lot of this was going to involve Cagali's personal life, so I thought fit to confirm with her first. Are you sure it's okay if we listen in on this? Yes. I'm grateful to you, Sir Rimuru, so unless you don't want to. I had no reason to say no, so I fell silent and lent her an ear. Dot. She basically gave us her life story, a summary of her long life, starting with being born the princess of a large nation. She told us about her guilt toward Milim, her awe toward Guy, her resentment toward Leon, and how things advanced from there. Listening to her, I almost began to feel guilty for killing Clayman. The Clayman from Cagali's story was a kind, attentive man, one that seemed to be well loved by his companions, or so it sounded. Things only went off track when he assumed the role of Demon Lord, and in the end, he was used and abused by Lieutenant Kondo. Thanks to that, he began spreading misfortune far and wide, and that made Guy and the other Demon Lords abandon him en masse. And then I, killed him. So about Clayman, I began. No need to apologize. I myself devised the plan, you were just better at executing it, Sir Rimuru. It's survival of the fittest in this world, after all. No need to show mercy to the vanquished. Cagali was right. From our point of view, Clayman was pure evil, and failing to eliminate him would have caused us tremendous damage. If someone had told us back then about this other side of him, all I could have said was, yeah, I'm sure. I did need to consider that he'd been mind-controlled, and maybe I was developing some sympathy for him, as illogical as it was. So I decided to tell Cagali something that I was on the fence about discussing at all. I wanted to tell you about Tyr. Tyr, too, had given us all kinds of trouble as part of the moderate jesters, not as much as Clayman or Footman, but she'd still been a thorn in my side. With the agreement we worked out, though, we were no longer enemies. I wouldn't call us friends, but it was natural for her to help us as a partner. That's why we rescued her when Jahil was about to do her in, but she wound up seriously hurt defending Cagali. She was still recuperating in her hospital room, and Seal was offering its assistance with her case as well. The data particles that formed Clayman's heart core have been kept in place with isolate. Should I gather them up to replace Tyr's missing parts? I gave Seal my permission. Thinking about it, I had swallowed up Clayman right at his final point of existence. I thought I had absorbed it all as energy, but apparently I had used isolate on his remains. I honestly didn't want his remains to be bumping around inside of me forever, and besides, I thought Clayman would have much preferred to be back with his friends than stay where he was. Actually, maybe Seal could revive Clayman completely, for all I know. If I planted the remnants of his data particles into a pseudo-soul and gave him a temporary body, there's a pretty decent chance that it'd work. But I wasn't about to inquire about that. Clayman was dead, and I wanted him to become part of Tyr to help her out. This was completely my own egotistical decision, so I wasn't sure whether to tell Cagali or anyone else, but now I felt obliged to. Oh. I see. So he'll be with Tyr. Thank you for that, Cagali whispered with a sad smile. I know it was just ego stroking on my part, but I'm still glad that Cagali seemed to approve of it. Unfortunately for me, the conversation didn't end there. By the way, Rimuru, Guy began, I can't help but think, aren't you acting a little too self-indulgent? Yeah, said Sylvia, nodding at Guy, taking pieces from a dead man and transplanting them into another person. Not even the demigod himself tried anything that crazy. I had forgotten those guys were here. I wish they could have just glossed over that for me, but they were hanging on to my every word. Hey, since when were you two so buddy-buddy? I asked. Huh? We're not friends. I don't mind her, but... Yeah. And I have to say, you chatting so casually with the Lord of Darkness, this personification of terror, is a lot more incomprehensible to me. Well, what do you want? Guys, a lot more broad-minded than you'd think. He doesn't get angry over trivial things, so as long as you know how to deal with him, he's a lot easier to get along with than he lets on. You really are extraordinary, Rimuru. Even more so than how Elle described. I mean, I thought that guy Crimson over there was the kind of scary demon who killed Jehiel, my fellow disciple, in seconds to become a demon lord. If you can be friends with him that easily, I wonder what all the fuss was about. Sylvia was talking so rapidly, I couldn't defend myself. But the man we were talking about laughed at the exchange. You're pretty shameless, too, saying all that in front of me. Ah. Looks like Guy's taking a liking to Sylvia, too. I like how he respects people who don't cower in fear of him. Considering the future, the two building a friendship was probably a good omen for us. Anyway, I thought we had sufficiently diverted the conversation, but that wasn't the end of it. Now, Rimuru, what did you do with Clayman's remains again? Unfortunately, Guy hadn't forgotten about all of that. I had no choice but to explain. Well, it's all really just a coincidence, you know. Like when I saved her from Jehiel's attack. I strung together a random bunch of thoughts to buy time. It's a little sad how used to this sort of thing I've become, but I had no intention of revealing my skills here, and if push came to shove, I wasn't above using my right to remain silent. Sounds pretty suspicious to me, remarked Sylvia. Are you hiding something? Yeah, you tell him. He always omits the most important part of the story at times like this. Shut up, guys. There's a lot I don't understand about it, either. I have no idea how it even worked this time. It was really Seal who did everything anyway. This is exactly why I didn't want them to pursue this topic, and, really, why are Guy and Sylvia so in sync with each other? They haven't even met before, and I didn't know Sylvia until today, either, but she looks so much like Elmesia that she doesn't seem at all like a stranger to me. So we had a surprisingly lively, friendly talk at this late-night meeting. Sylvia's lips were loosening a bit, too. By the way, Lady Cagali, she began, I wasn't sure if I should ask you this, but I was wondering if you could tell me about your friends a little. She sounded friendly enough about it. I didn't sense any ulterior motive. Huh? Replied Cagali, similarly puzzled at Sylvia. But then she seemed to recall something. I think I know what you're trying to get at. That's fine. And you don't have to use titles with me, either. No? Thank you. In that case, just Sylvia is okay with me, too. So. You want to know about Laplace? Yeah. I guess you heard that, huh? Yes. When you said Thalion, Laplace definitely reacted to that. And if the name of the sorceress dynasty was also Laplace's real name, then I suppose I was friends with quite a lofty figure. Their conversation continued for a bit. I had no idea what they were talking about, but I guess they were conferring over Laplace's true identity. And... Wait, Laplace was formerly a hero? Yes, he was. And also, he was my husband. Elle's daddy, too. Are you serious? Oh, super serious. I looked at Kigali in astonishment. She calmly nodded back at me. I suppose she had already worked through all of this in her mind, although I wonder if the same was true for Sylvia. I'm sure all these events happened ages ago, but despite discovering that Kigali had turned her long-lost, presumed dead husband into a walking dead, she didn't show any sign of resentment at all. I should apologize for that, Kigali said. I would completely understand if you resented me for it, but still, I'm really glad I got to meet Laplace. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. It made me think, even after death, his personality never changed, did it? And when I saw him protecting you in the end, it was like, wow, the man I loved isn't here any longer. The way Sylvia phrased it, Laplace could have fled that scene if he wanted to. But he didn't, and I suppose it showed that he had some pride as a member of the moderate jesters. We'll never know the truth now, but... well, not necessarily. I wasn't trying to offer them comfort or anything, but I couldn't help but let that fall from my lips. Maybe it's selfish of me, but I wasn't about to give up hope. Even Seal told me there was a non-zero chance he was still alive, so that's what I chose to believe when it came to Yuki and Laplace. Yuki had caused me all sorts of trouble, but he's still a fellow Japanese man and a student of Shizu. I thought that witnessing his death would come as a shock to me, but there wasn't really any sadness, maybe because I suspected that his death never actually happened. I mean, I know it's silly. I saw him vaporized right before my eyes. But there's just no trusting him that way. He tricked me 1,000,000 times before. That's why he's alive. And as long as I believed that, I didn't see any need to mourn. No, maybe not. The boss was always stubborn that way. Right? Thalion was living for that long without ever contacting me, too. There's just no saving him, is there? Abandoning me just because he got reborn as a walking dead and lost all his memories. No point worrying about someone that useless, no. Time to flip the page, I say. I suppose my words weren't in vain after all. I worried that I'd sound crass to them, but if I could lighten Kigali's and Sylvia's minds even a little, then good on me. Our late-night chat continued, helping us work past the day's sorrows, so we could win tomorrow's war. Interlude. Force of Justice. Feldway got back to the Celestial Palace just in time for Michael's own return. You sure got beaten down, didn't you? Yeah, Michael replied. We ran into some unexpected events. I set off to purge Obila for her defection, but my castle guard didn't work on her. What? I had no problem at all. That's probably why. There's only one of that skill, at the core. Only the mystics swear their allegiance to me, and there was nobody on this planet who knows me. There's me, isn't there? Hee. That'd go against the basic principle of the skill, though. It's pretty natural that any allegiance from you wouldn't count. The two of them updated each other like they were having a casual, everyday conversation. It was a surprise to Feldway that Michael couldn't use his castle guard, but at least he didn't suffer any major damage in the process. His concern was more about Obila the traitor, and what happened to her. What of Obila, then? She escaped on me, sadly. Obila's troops are outstandingly loyal to her. They fought well to protect her from me. It's a valuable asset that we lost. Michael was being frank about this. He had killed them all, but his attitude made it seem like some event unrelated to him. Yes, Obila commanded an excellent force. Truly, a regrettable loss. Feldway's reply was so indifferent that it was hard to believe he really thought so. Obila's troops were loyal only to her, not Feldway, so he didn't consider them any major loss. It had no impact on his castle guard, so he didn't see the problem. This coldness was one reason why Feldway wasn't very well liked by his peers, but he didn't care about that, preferring an unflaggingly rational approach at all times. He wasn't that way in the past, but there was no trace of the past to Feldway now. So, Michael looked at Leon and Jahil, the newcomers. Noticing that they were back here with a smaller number of people than when they left, he nodded and began to talk. I think our forces need to implement a chain of command as well. You'll remain Chief Commander, Feldway, but I think you need to decide exactly whom to deploy where. What do you think? Feldway nodded back at him. Well, I've worked things out with our final negotiating partner, so yes, let's decide that before we start our full invasion. So the main members of the Heavenly Force, save Xeranus, were once again assembled in the audience chamber. Feldway began by presenting the results of the current operation. Michael was open to this, but he had already heard all of it, so this was mostly a formality for Dino's sake. Oh, so Aulia was killed in action. Dino wasn't emotional over it. The fact that she'd been consumed by Vega was carefully omitted. Dino never knew her, but she was still part of the team, so he closed his eyes and prayed she'd rest in peace. He assumed that much was allowed anyway. Pico, Gaasha, and Mai followed his lead, although nobody else in the group cared enough to. Then the meeting continued, with no one seeming to care about how little camaraderie there was. Feldway was chairing this meeting, while Michael remained silent and showed no sign of interjecting. The main item on the agenda was appointing people to positions, clarifying the hierarchy to prevent hassles during the full-on invasion. Vega was geared up for this, eyes burning with ambition, but the others were less than enthusiastic. Dino looked like he couldn't care less. He kept as low a profile as possible, so no one assigned any responsibility to him. These were the circumstances when Feldway began his announcement. The person at the top of the hierarchy was Michael, the overseer. Feldway then named himself Supreme Commander and Chief Executive. Velzard was his advisor. They decided that she'd be allowed to run free, checking Guy's movements. Among the others, 9 people were strong enough to take command roles, Zerario chief among them. Or 10, actually, including a longtime friend of Feldway's who wasn't present at this meeting. Normally, a commander is asked to bring a tactical viewpoint to battle, but in this fight, the only thing that really mattered was individual strength. The way Feldway saw it, once a strict hierarchy was in place, everything else could be handled as they pleased. This was a very unsound way to run a military, but it worked for them up to now, so, without further hesitation, Feldway set up the pecking order based strictly on strength. The strongest here besides Feldway was Zerario, Jahil, and Feldway's absent friend. These would be named to a new group. First, I will be establishing a new post called the 3 Stellar Leaders to replace the 3 Mystic Leaders. They will serve as Saveldenava's generals, and I expect them to use their powers to the fullest. He saw a need to change the name since 2 of its members were not mystics. The new title played off Veldenava's role as the Star King Dragon, and the trio that served in this group would take general-style roles in the effort to revive the dragon. Cornu is dead, and Obila has betrayed us. We are adding Jahil to our ranks to replace them, and another is due to join us shortly, so I will appoint him then. A dissatisfied voice rose up from the audience. It was from Vega. Whoa, you're going to appoint some random guy from nowhere to command the heavenly armies instead of me? What's up with that? I'm not too sure I like to see that. Vega, having just gained new strength from consuming Aulia, was getting carried away again. He didn't seem to have a shred of remorse in his mind, much to everyone's chagrin. Only Yuki could handle someone like him, but Feldway wasn't here to play along with him. Silence. My decisions are final. The next time you express your own opinions, you will be punished. Are you prepared for that? Feldway wasn't exactly a shrewd utilizer of human resources. Are you useful or not? That's all that mattered, and if they were useless, he tossed them aside. He was thorough with that mindset, which is why no one liked him, but he didn't care about that. The next time Vega sassed him, he was deadly serious about doing away with him. Vega, with his excellent instinct for survival, sensed this well enough. He might have felt like an almighty being now, but Feldway's strength was on a whole other dimension. He knew he was still no match for him, so he had no choice but to sheepishly retreat. TCH. Sorry. I just want to be a little more appreciated, is all. That's why I interrupted you." With that, he said no more, stifling his frustration. But he'd be grinning all over again once Feldway continued. "Don't sulk like that. I think very highly of you, I'll have you know. That's why I'm naming you leader of the 7 heavenly generals." As the name suggested, this group was meant to comprise all of their ultimate skill-bearing angelic members, but they didn't have enough to fill all 7 seats. Feldway was never one to fret over details, so he just put their remaining top powerhouses into this group. Kagali and Obila were supposed to be heavenly generals, with Vega joining what was meant to be the 4 stellar leaders. Mai and Aulia worked as support soldiers, diving in wherever they were needed. Unfortunately, this all needed to be revised from the ground up. Regardless, Zorario, Jahil, and an as yet unnamed 3rd member would be the 3 stellar leaders, and the 7 heavenly generals consisted of Vega, the leader, Leon, Dino, Pico, Gasha, Alios, and Myfoki. The stellar leaders were each meant to command their own corps, while the heavenly generals would engage in maneuvers either solo or with a group of people. With that system in place, it was time to explain the operation. Now that we have brought Leon into our ranks, it is safe to say that we have taken down one of the demon lords and his forces. That means one less point for us to attack. As Feldway spoke, Mai projected a miniature version of the key world with 5 points of light on it. One of them, the white spot on the lands controlled by Leon, faded away, leaving 4 behind. Feldway then pointed at one of them. It changed color from white to red at Mai's direction. "This area will not need to be addressed. My friend has promised to help me, not Guy." The now extinguished light was in the far west of the land, the domain controlled by Dagrel. "Don't tell me Dagrel switched sides?" Leon asked. His question was addressed by none other than the 3rd stellar leader, who had just stepped in, a slender man with an exceptionally large physique. "Here I am, Feldway. Pretty bold of you to release me from the seal like that." This was not Dagrel. He had long, shaggy, green hair, not the dull blue color of the demon lords. His eyes shone like jade, too, while Dagrel had blue eyes. The resemblance was still clear, however. The man's name was Fen. He was the younger brother of Earthquake Dagrel, a man with godlike powers. People called him the Mad Fist, after an event where Veldenava sealed him away after he went on a rampage in ancient times. Dino, still barely paying attention, was the first to react to him. "Oh, no way. You took off his Gleipnir chaos bonds? What are you thinking, Feldway? You know how wary Dagrel was of him." It was rare for him to get this confrontational with Feldway. He was so shocked that he couldn't help but raise his voice. "Hare. Don't worry. Fen and I are friends. We share a common mission. Besides, his strength. It's astounding." He didn't need to say it. Fen made no effort to hide the overwhelming aura of his magicule-driven force. His existence points numbered over 60 million, so large that he'd be comparable to a true dragon. But Dino wasn't the only one displeased by Fen's presence. Tisk. This evil god, sealed away in ancient times. A demigod would be one thing, but not even I would want to take on a tyrant like this. Jahil spat out those words in disgust. He wasn't directly acquainted with this man, but the demigod said plenty about him. As he put it, he was an evil god who had been sealed off by Veldenava due to his destructive rampages. In Jahil's mind, he was a living disaster, the greatest after Avalage, the world's destroyer dragon, and now that myth was standing before his eyes. The sight nauseated him. But Fen didn't care. With a grin, he put an arm around Jahil's shoulders and whispered in his ear. "Hey, come on, we're buddies, right? Why don't we just get along? I hear that I'm being appointed to the 3 stellar leaders, just like you. You got real potential, too, not like these other wimps. You're more than qualified to be my lackey." He was completely looking down on Jahil. It was humiliating. Jahil believed that he should be ruling the world as its rightful king, so this kind of disrespect was completely unacceptable. But he couldn't lodge any complaints. He felt a doom-inducing pressure from the arm around his shoulder. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead as he sat back in his chair. Humph. I'll allow this for now. I don't intend to have things end like this, but no need to make a scene right now. With that, he agreed to be Fenn's servant for the time being. He wondered how Zorario would react to this, but it didn't look like he had any intention of fighting it. It wasn't ultimate dominion doing its thing on him. Zorario was a warrior, and he knew well enough how he stood against this man. Would he beat him or not? He couldn't know unless they fought, but all-out warfare between them would cause massive damage to the planet and endanger the whole operation. It was just a waste of time. So Zorario resolved this situation by tempering his expectations, and with that, Fenn was now head of the 3 stellar leaders. With everyone assigned their ranks, all eyes turned back toward the miniature key world. Now, Feldway, what did you mean when you said Dagral is not a problem? I can see that Sir Fenn has joined us, but that doesn't explain everything. Fenn smirked at Jahil's question. Wow, that's pretty sad. Are you underestimating me that much? If you know me, then you know this, too, right? Dagral might be my older brother, but I'm far better than him. I don't need to hear your bragging, Jahil bitterly replied. If you truly claim there won't be any problems, I want to see it in the results you put up. Jahil was an arrogant man. He recognized that Fenn was talented, but he wasn't about to give up all his imperial pride and lick his boots. But Fenn grinned, apparently liking this attention. You know me, and you still act like that. All right. I'll be happy to live up to your expectations. He accentuated this with a laugh. He barely had a chance to so much as talk to anyone since Veldenava sealed him up all those years ago, but scenes of the world had continually floated into his mind, like he was dreaming, the result of his connection to his brother Dagral, deep in his soul. That gave him a certain degree of understanding of world affairs. He knew they were on the tipping point of a great war between nations, and that he'd soon have an environment to rampage in once more. Feldway was the only person to visit him in prison. He was only taking care of Fenn because Veldenava had entrusted him with his care, but over time, they began chatting about things and came to each other for advice. As the supreme leader of his own domain, Feldway had nobody close to consult with, and all this time sealed away was making Fenn lonely as well. It was only natural, perhaps, that they'd confided in each other so much. Now Fenn had a field to play in, along with companions he could show off his power to. How could he not be enthusiastic about that? It's not that he was any less vicious than he used to be, it's just that he had come to value his friends more. Having these friends made him happier than anything, so despite how it looked, he was truly, honestly grateful to Feldway. So Fenn declared to the group that he'd take care of Dagral, but Dino was less than convinced. Wait. Hey, Feldway, are you sure about this? If you release Fenn, Dagral will no longer have any reason to protect Skyspire Tower, right? Skyspire Tower was a stairway that led to the Celestial Palace. For those without the key to the large gate leading to the palace, navigating the tower was the only way in. Dagral was its guardian, put in place to keep Fenn from ever returning to the world. If Fenn attacked him, Dino said, they might run into some serious trouble, depending on the results. Despite being under ultimate dominion, Dino still had free thought. It'd be a different story if he was more strongly influenced by this thrall, but he at least had the right to say what he wanted. The same was true, by the way, for Leon. His actions were restricted, but he still thought like he always did. That's how he refrained from using wide-range attacks while fighting Sylvia, keeping any damage inflicted on her to a minimum. He had also sent out signals with his eyes, but sadly, Sylvia didn't pick up on those. Not that Sylvia was imperceptive, she was just too occupied with a lot of other things. But even if she spotted it, she couldn't have learned much more than Leon still has his free will, so it wouldn't have meant much anyway. At any rate, ultimate dominion may restrict their actions, but it still allowed for free thought to a certain extent. This was more convenient for Feldway. He couldn't hold a strategy conference if people couldn't engage in flexible thinking, so Dino's comments were more than welcome. That does deserve to be looked into, yes. What should we do to address that concern? Well, I don't know what, really. Dino quickly lost steam after having the question bounced back at him. He spoke up more out of shock than anything, but it's not like he stood to lose anything here. Now he was back to his usual slacker self, wondering what he got so worked up about. I mean, if you ask me tough questions like that, I dunno what to say, you know. He tried to sit back down, hoping to have all this blow over for him. But Feldway wasn't about to let him. I trust in Fen, but I do understand your concerns, Dino. So I think the best solution here is to send out some other people as well. You were planning to do that all along, thought Dino. Feldway must have seen his outburst as a godsend, since suggesting this out of nowhere would make it look like he didn't trust Fen. Dino now feared that he'd be forced to join in on this, and he was right. I know you're worried, Dino, so why don't you go see for yourself how strong Fen is? Oh, I'm good. Or, don't be shy. I doubt you'll get much chance to do anything this battle, but if you wanna see how strong I am, I won't stop you. That wasn't at all what Dino wanted, but it was already too late. Resigning himself to his fate, he reluctantly nodded. Yeah. Well, if you're offering, I'll join in with Pico and Gasha. Whoa. Dino. Don't drag us into this. Look, I'm sorry, okay. I'm still fresh from a life-or-death battle with Rain, and you want me to fight some more. How is that fair? Dino's companions were roaring their disapproval, but he ignored them. He figured they were probably slacking off at work, too, so he roped them in to lighten his own load a little. Feldway approved it, offering no particular objection. He really did trust Fen, but he also knew that Dagrel was no pushover. This wasn't a man to take lightly, to be certain, and besides, Dagrel had another younger brother, too. Stories of these three gigantic brothers causing all kinds of havoc in ancient times were well known, and Feldway, knowing the truth behind those old tales, was ready to pull out all the stops. Here, you join in too, Leon. We'll stage an attack on Skyspire Tower with Fen and 4 heavenly generals. That ought to be enough. So they had their member roster for the next target. That seemed to mark the last item on the agenda, but Feldway wasn't done. All right. Now let's decide on the other targets to strike. Huh? We're not deciding on a time yet? No. The plan is to use our attacking superiority to stage multiple invasions at the same time. In fact, no offense to Fen, but this Skyspire Tower attack is really just a decoy. A decoy? So who are we really striking? Dino wasn't all that interested in the details behind the operation, but if he was getting this involved, he thought, he may as well hear the whole thing. It'd at least make him feel better if the other attack sites looked a lot tougher. Besides, if he could work things right and run into Rimuru, he could ingratiate himself with him with some new intelligence. So, knowing full well that this wasn't how he usually acted, he asked Feldway that question. First all, I want you to recall what our mission is. That was the answer he received. Dino didn't know what that mission was. He recalled it was something absurd, along the lines of resurrecting Veldenava. Which, yeah, if they could do that, Dino thought it'd be cool to see it, but doesn't Sir Veldenava have his own motivations? Maybe he got tired of Feldway being such a pain, or maybe he wants to stay back until the human race matures more. Here was Veldenava, the creator and a truly transcendent being. It seemed selfish to Dino for people to make their own assumptions about what he wanted. It's always so annoying when someone says he's speaking the word of the gods. They give their own interpretations, distorting the original intentions all the time. Luminous had the worst time with that, didn't she? That's why she opted against naming a human holy emperor. The exact same words can often be interpreted differently depending on how people perceive them. Humans are creatures that believe only what they want to, even when they're wrong, they're not very open to admitting it. For one thing, Luminous never once referred to herself as the only god of this world. Yet, for some reason, Her followers have come to believe that Luminous is the sole deity out there. She didn't go out of her way to deny it, apparently it was more convenient for her that way, but truth's habit of changing depending on one's interpretation of it leads to all sorts of issues if mishandled. Dino, having observed the human world for a long time, had fully internalized this. But if one of his co-workers was exploiting this in a bad way, he really wanted no part of it. If we want to resurrect Sir Veldenava, all we need now are the draconic elements of Veldora. But there's one other obstacle we shouldn't forget about, isn't there? Was there? Dino sure didn't know. But Feldway's eyes were right on him. Oh, come on. Me? Asked someone else. He looked around. Everyone else had stern, expressionless looks on their faces. Zerario appeared to be completely ignoring Feldway. Maybe he took offense at being mind-dominated. Leon, having just joined the team, wasn't following this conversation and didn't seem interested in it in the first place. Fen and Jahil were the same way, this was all new stuff to them, so no way did they have an answer. Pico and Gasha were less than interested, hiding behind Dino and keeping their heads down. The other heavenly generals were more useful pawns than actual friends of Feldway. He never went to them for feedback. No, this question was lodged squarely at Dino. Are you kidding me? Now that Kagali and Yuki are gone, I'm supposed to be the brains of this outfit? Then something occurred to Dino. Shouldn't this really be Zerario's role? It was, but, as he was just realizing now, he had drawn the short end of the stick, but it's not like he could do anything about it. So he decided to dodge the question, lest anyone get their hopes up about him. Do you even need to ask? He said, grinning suggestively. That was all it took to receive a satisfied nod from Feldway. I knew it. He's so smart that he doesn't even want other people's opinions, right? Just give him a pat on the back or two, and the conversation goes merrily along. Comfortable in his success, Dino nodded back. Yes, indeed, Feldway replied. As Dino surmised, we have to get rid of this wild card Masayuki. On the off chance that he becomes the medium Ladora uses to resurrect himself, there's no guarantee that won't negatively impact Sir Michael. Not that I said anything, Dino thought, being careful not to let it show on his face. Then he briskly nodded. This logic seemed faulty to him, but he wasn't enough of a team player to point that out. If Feldway wanted to do that, let him. Nobody else offered any feedback, either, so Feldway continued. As long as Veldora is embedded deep within that meddlesome labyrinth, our next target should really be Masayuki. We'll be gradually sapping away at their capacity to fight, and once we take away enough, he'll have no choice but to come out of his lair. That was Feldway's plan. If he won't come out, we'll just cut down the rest of their forces. I'm kind of friends with Masayuki, too, though, Dino absent-mindedly thought. He wanted to find a way to let him know he was being targeted, but now that Michael had tightened his control over him, he couldn't think of any way how. He couldn't even send a thought communication to Rimuru, since it'd be a clear act of betrayal. His only option was to hope for some miraculous encounter on the field, but Dino wasn't counting on that. All he could do was pray for his safe escape. Do we know where Masayuki is? Good question, Dino. I'll let Velzad tackle it. Yes, based on the location of Vielgrin's presence, I do have a rough idea of where Masayuki is. I've picked up Vielgrin's presence in several spots within the imperial capital, along with one in the kingdom of Inglesia. She's fully concealed her aura, but that's not enough to fool my eyes. Velzad the Ice Dragon's tracking and recognition skills were as good or better than Dragon's Eye, Milim's skill. And this wasn't some random face in the crowd she was looking for. It was her own sister. Tracing her was child's play to Velzad. It looked like Vielgrind was using her parallel existences to fortify the Empire's defenses while presumably keeping Masayuki under guard. In response, I moved the lights on her miniature planet around. The one in the central west of the continent, not far from where Luminous ruled, joined Dagral's dot in turning from white to red. Feldway pointed to it. So that means Masayuki is here in Inglesia. Vega, I'd like you to attack that site. Any objections? That wasn't a question so much as an order. He only said that to make Vega think he was part of the debate and keep him enthusiastic, and, of course, Vega was too simple-minded to pick up on this, so he grinned and shook his head. I'm on the job. Inglesia is an old haunt of mine, besides. It's got a lot of hidden passageways nobody knows about. I'll use those to sneak in and kill that kid. Feldway nodded his affirmation. The actual plan called for Vega to serve as a distraction while Arias slipped in and killed Masaki, but Vega's vision of this operation was fine by him, too. Either way, Feldway planned to visit Inglesia's capital as well, as he wanted to see how the enemy reacted to an uninhibited Vega. But it didn't end there, of course. Zorario, you'll be leading our entire army to provide support for us. Track Luminous's moves, and if she takes any action against us, stop her. And if she doesn't? Then stand by. Once I give the order, you will be conducting an all-out assault on Inglesia. All right. Feldway's orders were the law. Zorario put his dissatisfaction aside and meekly nodded back. Now the only official not assigned anything so far was Jahil. He waited for Feldway's words, bracing himself for the worst. There's no way he'd let one of the 3 stellar leaders remain idle. Then, to be completely safe, Jahil, you'll be our mobile force. I'll provide you with troops. You'll be expected to do whatever it takes to help Fen. Yeesh. You'll go that far? I really don't see the need. Don't be that way, Fen. It's just for the worst-case scenario. Remember, if you subdue Dagral, you'll have that army under your command. Right. But as long as Dagral is out there, his legions of giants are gonna get in the way. It's our job to stop them, isn't it? Yes, exactly. Fen crowed to his peers that it was unnecessary, but Feldway was in the right here, and Jahil had nothing to lose either way. If Fen was an active part of this, he could just sit back and watch. If he got into danger, he could swing in to the rescue, and then Fen would owe him one. He'd have his chance to shine in battle either way, so there was no need for impatience. Humph. I wish I had my own trained soldiers at my side here, but so be it. As soon as I see Fen's victory for myself, I'll attack from the west and advance toward the center. Is that all right? Sure. Do whatever you like. Jahil shut his mouth the moment he heard that. As far as he was concerned, he was done talking. He was an ambitious man, and he resented being treated like a lapdog here, but he also owed Feldway. Between that and the obvious difference in strength between them, Jahil thought it wise to follow him for now. Velzard, by the way, reported directly to Michael, so Feldway had no authority to give her orders. She was a free thinker by nature, so their doctrine called for her to do whatever she felt like. With that, everyone had their roles in place. Now that they had a firm direction to take, Michael spoke up. Allow me to add one thing as well. The labyrinth under the demon lord Raimuru's control presents major problems if our enemy holds up inside of it. Like Feldway said, it's far better to lure them out of there. Thus, I have decided to give the lands in the former nation of Eurasania, currently under the demon lord Milim's control, to Xeranus. Whether it's Milim's domain or the Inglesian capital, if war breaks out in those areas, Raimuru could never ignore it. They'll be sure to send troops out, and it'll be your job to crush them. There will be no doubting our victory then. Michael addressed them with palpable conviction. This was, in fact, their greatest advantage as the attackers. Destroying their bases, one by one, gradually takes apart their power to fight. Repeat that for long enough, and victory is all but guaranteed. Once they take down all their enemies' bases apart from the capital of Raimuru, they'll be ready to conduct a punishing siege. Ramirez's labyrinth is still an enigma. There might be more than one way in and out, but cutting off their supplies would be enormous. They might still be able to get a few strategic assets into Tempest, but once they were separated from the rest of the world, it'd be easy to break their influence. Of course, they couldn't sit on their hands forever. The ultimate goal was to procure Veldora's draconic factors, and they couldn't do that by waiting. However, Michael still decided that once they had that situation in place, they could take their time working out the rest of their strategy. It might have been the right way to go, but Dino was unconvinced. Whoa, Miriam's the daughter of Veldenava, you know. You understand that, right? He was fully venting his frustration now. But Michael didn't let it bother him. Is that a problem? He asked, keeping a cool expression. A problem? I mean, wouldn't that displease Sir Veldenava? It was a natural question, from Dino's point of view. Attempting to do anything to Miriam really was nothing but an act of betrayal against Veldenava. What could Michael be thinking? His response was so matter-of-fact that he didn't seem to think it was any kind of problem at all. And Feldway agreed with him. Yes, Dino, the Demon Lord Miriam is the daughter of Sir Veldenava. However, the way I see it, we are no different from her, in terms of being created by that dragon. That's likely what Michael and Feldway truly believed. Their respect and loyalty were pointed at no one but Veldenava. They didn't even have a shred of affection for his daughter. Jahil, presumably agreeing with them, sniffed as he mockingly glared at Dino. Having met his end at the hand of Miriam's wrath in the past, the idea of invading the former Eurasania filled him with joy, and here's Dino reigning on the parade. It wasn't what Jahil wanted to see at all. Dino looked back at Feldway. This is exactly why Obila turned traitor on us. These guys have the craziest ideas about stuff. And if he questioned it any further, he might be branded a traitor, too. Don't worry about it, Dino. If it turns out I was wrong, I am sure he will resurrect himself to correct our path. If his beloved daughter is in danger, after all, he is bound to come to her aid. Thus, we are doing the exact right thing here. Dino had nothing left to say. His old friend was dead now. If this had only dawned on him sooner, he could have fled, and now he was regretting that he didn't. So, with the general outline of the Tema War worked out, things were ready to kick off. The day would soon come when a great calamity would engulf the world in a whirlpool of chaos, drastically changing it forever. Chapter 2. Beginning of the War. After our late-night discussion, it was decided that we'd take care of Cagali and Tyr over in Tempest. Tyr still hadn't come to yet, so it'd be safer to care for her in the labyrinth. We'd be able to get more detailed information on her in there, and the labyrinth would be helpful in determining if something malicious was taking its toll on her. Cagali was bound to join her there, so I decided to accept them both without complaint. Sylvia, meanwhile, returned to Thalion. She could help us out a lot in the event of war, but to Sylvia, Thalion, the home of her daughter, was more important. I certainly couldn't impose our problems on her, so we promised each other that we'd work together if something came up. I also gave her one of my cell phones, just in case. Elmesia has one already, but I thought giving one to Sylvia would be good for backup purposes. We just saw that the demon's rings weren't the all-powerful communications tools I thought they were, so the more ways we have to reach out, the better. We can use them for fun purposes, besides, once all this strife is over. So, after exchanging contact information, I watched Sylvia head off. Now here I am in my office. So much paperwork had accumulated on my desk that I thought I was back to my daily grind for a moment. Just looking at these piles made me around 30% angrier at Feldway. I'm not just doing this for funsies, you know. I've got loads and loads of projects that need my approval, and stacks of minutes from meetings to decide this or that measure to go through. The minutes, at least, could be put on the back burner. That's finished business anyway, so no need to try rushing through them. So I looked over the new projects that needed my approval, quickly deciding whether to proceed with them. I was busy, but there wasn't much I could do about that. After all, they were holding the World Congress over in Inglesia in 2 days. Yes, the World Congress, a regular holding of the Council of the West, but with the Emperor of the Eastern Empire participating as well. A truly unprecedented event in world history. What's more, I was also due to attend this Congress after meeting up with Mjolnir over in Bloomond. Thanks to some idiot invading Leon's domain, though, my schedule's in a total shambles right now. I was having to use my little bits of free time here and there to plow through all this paperwork, which sucked. Now, though, it was all behind me. I could sit back, have a cup of tea, and enjoy some unstructured free time. It'd be a good chance to calm down and gather my thoughts before the big event. Your tea, Sir Rimuru. It was Diablo bringing it this time, not Shuna. He was really giving his all as my secretary, presumably because Shion wasn't around. Thank you very much, you take a break, too, okay? I motioned at Diablo to sit across from me. He went on for a bit about what a great honor this is and all that tearful crap, but I ignored it. So, tell me, what's Feldway like from your point of view? I asked him. From what I could tell, Feldway seemed uniquely unpopular even amongst his own forces. If he wasn't, Dino wouldn't have been so cavalier about two-timing him. Regardless, I needed more intel on the enemy. If I knew more about his personality, it'd help me decide on things like how far I could bluff with him when the time came. I knew he was a cautious leader, but I thought it wise to ask if there was anything else I could exploit. Diablo thought for a bit before answering. Well, he's a very serious-minded man. Some might call him hard-headed or inflexible, but either way, once he makes up his mind about something, nothing can make him change it. He doesn't seek out other people's feedback, not even for reference purposes, so opinions about him are generally split among his troops. So for bootlicking yes men, he'd be an easy boss to have, just do whatever he orders you to do, and it's all good. For talented, creative people, though, he'd be a headache-inducing tyrant who shut you down at every possible moment. Not having your feedback be acknowledged at all is always super stressful. If a boss has a reason not to take my advice and can explain it to me, that's great, but if he just dismisses it out of hand, all that does is encourage grudges. Anything else? I asked. Well, Diablo seemed concerned. I'm not fully sure about this, he said, but... And then he revealed something a lot more important than I expected. To put it simply, he was talking about where the enemy was based, and how they traveled between there and this world. They, the aggressors, were originally expelled from this world by Veldenava. They changed greatly over time, as did the angels assigned to watch over them, and now here they were. Their base, of course, was on another world, connected into the key world that we're on via special power fields called underworld gates, of which several exist worldwide. It was the responsibility of the demons to protect, or rather, manage, these gates, which the demons used to expand their spheres of influence in a pretty aggressive manner. The only underworld gate known to exist right now is located near Leon's domain and is guarded by Carrera. Testarossa and Ultima used to guard gates of their own, but they were lost following a massive battle. We'd all be far better off without those things, he bitterly stated. If you go to the other world with a physical body, it'll wind up contaminated and transformed. You can safely assume that anyone who comes here from the other side is an aggressor. The easiest thing, in other words, would be to just destroy these gates, since they do nothing but spread chaos worldwide. But Testarossa and Ultima didn't think that way. They protected their gates for a long time, but they were already broken by the time Diablo went scouting for recruits, so they readily agreed to join him instead. That sounded a bit like a lie to me, but I didn't say so. The gate Carrera guarded was on its last legs at best. Besides, I think it was just left unattended because it was inaccessible to people with too much power. If anything, I assumed the gates were broken on purpose. But getting back to the main topic, Diablo's concern was about how Feldway and his team came to this world. His guess was that a new gate appeared somewhere in the Empire. Or do you think maybe the one Testarossa guarded was restored? That cannot be ruled out, no. But that doesn't match the time frame when Feldway appeared in the Empire, so I think it is safe to assume another gate is involved. That makes sense. So your guess is that the aggressor's main base is in the Empire? That's what I wanted to confirm, but Diablo was focused on something else entirely. Not just there, no. From what Cagali told me, Feldway has definitely opened the gates to the Celestial Palace. Normally, A certain key is required to open them, but the Celestial Palace, the origin place, as it's also called, the birthplace of Veldenava, right? And as Cagali put it, Feldway's base is adjacent to all other worlds out there, so Diablo's question here was basically about how they got this key. There is no point in worrying over how they got it. What matters is that if you pass through the gates of the Celestial Palace, you can go to a key world with the same main body that you have in the other world. Oops. Good thing I didn't say that, because I was way off. But what's he mean by that main body stuff? Among the primordials, only Feldway was given a body by Veldenava. Currently he's occupying a temporary body in this world, so there would be no point in killing him in that state. Something like Veilgrin's parallel existences? Not like that, no. They are not connected at all times, it is more like splitting one's consciousness. Your memories are synchronized on a regular basis, I presume, so you may see it as functionally similar. And that, as Diablo explained, was what made this so troublesome. The way I understood it, Veilgrind was like a group of synced-up computers connected to the internet, while Feldway was more like a set of terminals sending data to the main computer, no net involved. That seems to be the correct understanding. In other words, not even a dimensional combo would reach Feldway's main body, making him an extremely difficult opponent to handle. Yeah, sure sounds like it. So we can't defeat Feldway unless we go to wherever his main body is. That is annoying, but, wait, if that main body's going out of its way to come to this world, that's good for us, right? It'd certainly save us the trouble of looking for someone when we have no idea where he is. But as Diablo explained, it wasn't that simple. It is, yes, but the fact remains that Feldway is extremely powerful. The fighting ability of his main body may very likely outclass Guy's. That's why I believe we need to consider the worst-case scenario here. The main body granted to him by Veldenava was like a treasure to Feldway. That's why he liked using all these temporary bodies, apparently, to prevent his main one from being harmed. But now we might have to think about what'll happen if he does away with that approach. That was important. We can't have our plans upended by a single change of direction by the enemy, especially if it grants him that much more fighting power. Guy's an even match for Velzard when he tries, right? So you think Feldway's up there with true dragons as well? Yes, that would be the case. As Diablo explained to me, the Feldway of the past was a really, really bad guy. We thought he wasn't as much of a menace as Xeranus the Insect Lord or Ivalage the world's destroyer dragon, but that may be way off the mark. If that wasn't the main body whose EP we measured in the labyrinth, it might not even be accurate at all. So now Feldway's true abilities are an unknown to us, huh? Well, I'm still hoping to leave him to you, but you think you'll be all right? It was my plan to have Diablo handle Feldway for me. Learning that his actual strength was probably true dragon level was a surprise, but I'm sure Diablo could figure out a way through it, or is that just wishful thinking? But as soon as I asked the question, Diablo smiled from ear to ear. I am constantly moved by your trust in me, Sir Rimuru. I promise you that I will strive to live up to your expectations. Yep. Seems all right to me. Diablo might be way too overconfident, but he never takes on tasks he's not capable of. I have no idea if he can actually win or not, but he thinks he could deal with Feldway anyway. It's not right for me to keep doubting him. If I have a suspicion that a fight's gonna turn out to be an extended stalemate, better to let one of my own trusted men handle it. So, as originally planned, I would have Diablo do his best for me. Now that I knew just how bad a dude Feldway was, I was curious about his next target. What do you think his next move will be? I asked Diablo. Well, it is hard to conjecture, but judging by his personality, it seems likely that he would target Sir Masayuki. Huh? Sure didn't see that one coming. But I couldn't dismiss that, either. Part of me wondered what possible point there would be in aiming for Masayuki, but thinking it over again, it did seem plausible. Why would Masayuki be targeted? Chances are it's because they suspect he's the reincarnation of Ludora. Veilgrin's unconditional love for him sure seems to back that fact up, too. Feldway struck me as a lot warier of Ludora than Masayuki, and I'm not really sure why, but, yes, it would make Masayuki a target for him. For that matter, Sir Rimuru, I'm not sure the reason even matters. Not to keep repeating myself, but Feldway is a very hard-headed man, the type who refuses to admit his own failures. He is not at all the kind of person who'd give up after a single attempt. Diablo was starting to depress me. It made so much sense now. In that case, this World Congress might wind up being pretty dangerous. Veilgrin's escorting me, so I think I'll be fine unless something really bad happens, but I want you to be on the lookout for me too, please. You may be assured, Sir Rimuru, that I am always fully prepared for anything. I could trust Diablo that way. His personality has its quirks, but he's never disappointed me when it comes to his work. Plus, with his main rival Shion out on business, there was nothing distracting him any longer. So we continued talking about our problems in detail, going over all my concerns one by one, when I received a startling piece of information. Rimuru. I got urgent news. It was from Milim, and she sounded like nothing but trouble for me. What's up? Well, Obila just fled to my domain. Oh? She told me Feldway found out she double-crossed them, and she got in a fight against Michael. This really wasn't the kind of thing I wanted to talk about over a demon's ring-powered thought communication. So I decided to head over to Milim's place. Milim's castle was still under construction, but part of it was already completed and habitable. There was a hospital facility in one corner, and Obila was resting in one of its rooms. She was in a pretty bad state when she made it here, about to slip into a coma at any moment, but now she was awake and sitting up in her bed. She had been sleeping the whole time up to now, so they hadn't been able to interrogate her yet. Yeah, I bet they haven't, I thought as I went over to greet Obila. Hello. My name's Rimuru Tempest, and I'm a demon lord around these parts. This was our first meeting, so I saw fit to introduce myself. This was greeted with much dismay by Frey, who looked even more bewitching than she did before. I know it might be rude to say this to someone as lofty as you, Sir Rimuru, but shouldn't you try to act with a little more authority? If you throw your weight around and show that you can step up to do what needs to be done at any moment, that'll set you apart from the pack with most people. Frey wasted no time complaining to me, but then, I'm sure he's just worried that I'm a bad influence on Milim. I know whenever Frey yells at her about something, the first thing out of her mouth is usually "but Rimuru." Frey's like a mom worrying about the no-good kids her child hangs out with, isn't she? It's kind of charming, in a way. I couldn't help but smile at the thought, and Carillion was beaming, too. Yo. Never fun to get caught under Frey's gaze, is it? Guess he saw a kindred spirit in me. Carillion and Frey both talk a lot, but when nobody's watching, they're a lot more easygoing with me. That's what I asked from them. I'd hate it if I had to act all formal around those two. Nevertheless, they seemed like very different people to me now. The Nimaru had briefed me on it, but now that I saw them in real life, they really had changed a bunch. So I heard you've made your awakened power fully your own now? I sure did. Tell Benimaru I appreciate his help earlier. Carillion and Benimaru are real good friends, after all. Benimaru tried to fight him the first time they met, and I guess that rubbed Carillion the right way. The power balance between them had flip-flopped long ago, but Carillion didn't worry about it much, despite all the talk about catching up and overtaking Benimaru soon. I thought it showed how open-minded he was. And Frey, too. Indeed, I'm certainly thankful as well. Now I can be an even greater help to Milim than before, she said with a smile. She doesn't really mean that she can yell at Milim more forcefully going forward, does she? I suspected that, but it went without saying that we needed all the power we could get for the war ahead, so I gracefully accepted her gratitude. I have to say, though, Ramirez's labyrinth is such a cheat, Frey added. I was working with her my entire time as a demon lord, but I had no idea she could use her skill like that. Yeah, that's for sure, agreed Carillion. I just thought she stuck around because Guy likes her a lot, but I was amazed that little lady was hiding that kind of skill, you know. I don't think she was hiding it. It's just that nobody noticed. Hey, I knew about it. Maybe, Milim, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not used the right way. The labyrinth proved that much to me. So don't be a sore loser, all right? Frey wasn't about to let Milim take all the credit here. Carillion laughed at her a bit. Still, he said, you can't discount Milim, either. I'm sure us two look like a bunch of idiots, too, besides. But now I'm convinced, you know, when it comes to handling people, nobody's better than you, Rimuru. Right? He's sure been handling us well. Frey was agreeing with him, but, really, Ramiriz's labyrinth was completely unexpected to me. I just asked her what she could do with it, figuring we could find some kind of useful application for it, and it was like, whoa, you can do that kind of stuff? Then, after some trial and error, our current labyrinth was born. It wasn't like I was picturing that from the start. They were really heaping too much praise on me. In terms of the results, though, the labyrinth really was something. Getting revived whenever you died inside there. That's literally cheating death. It's perfect for real-world battle training, and it's also an impregnable fortress. It was honestly a mystery to me why Ramires didn't get much credit until I came along. It's not like I engineered any of that, but it didn't seem right to bring all that up here, so I just laughed it off. Right, said Frey. Now that the hellos are done with, how about we get down to business? The atmosphere in this hospital room suddenly grew somber. Obila, blankly staring at our exchange so far, tightened up her expression. Then she turned toward me. I'm glad to meet you, Sir Rimuru. I am Obila, former mystic leader in charge of handling the cryptids. She spoke with a humble look on her face, and I didn't get the sense that she was lying to me. Milim and the others seemed to believe her, and my gut told me she was telling the truth, too. But, just in case, I tried to probe her a bit. Now, just to be clear, you do understand that you turning traitor just before war breaks out could lead people to think you're a spy, right? Yes, of course. I don't have any way to disprove that, but at the very least, I'll tell you about whatever I know. She sounded sincere, and there wasn't a trace of doubt on her face. Then, despite still not being back to full health, she explained what happened to her. After her meeting with Milim, she went back to Feldway and obtained a physical body, but, at the same time, she inadvertently acquired an angelic skill. She feared the worst, assuming that this skill would open her up to mind control, so before Feldway could force her to bow to him, she did away with Azrael, Lord of Salvation, the ultimate skill she acquired. Sylvia had taught me about that, separating one's heart core from their skill. I thought that was a pretty smart move, but if they sensed that Obila had thrown away her skill, they must have found out pretty quick that she was turning traitor. It made for a pretty uphill battle for Sylvia and Kagali and the rest, but it might not be right to hold Obila responsible for that. Best to drop that matter instead of bringing it up. What's more important is the authenticity of Obila's story. Honestly, it sounded pretty credible to me. I agree. It was consistent throughout and included information she was better off hiding from you. If she was here for espionage purposes, going this far wouldn't be worth the price. Right? I mean, she told us about getting attacked by Michael, about her skill, and so forth. Telling us about how Michael's castle guard didn't activate, and how he was using Veilgrin's and Velzard's skills like they belonged to him, and how he destroyed Obila's army. All this vital info and none of it sounded like lies. It's kind of interesting to examine information from the standpoint of how it benefits the informant if it's all a lie. I liked searching for opposing opinions on the net a lot, too, finding out which side of the argument's more popular and what sources people were using to see how credible each viewpoint was. This method rewarded me with Obila, too. If she was deceiving us, she'd have Michael's authority over her backing her up, but everything she was telling us was too true. Seal's verification work confirmed it, and most importantly of all, Obila agreed to let me subject her to my analyze and assess skill. With that, I could almost certainly tell whether a skill was present or not, and that turned up nothing, either. Obila didn't have Azrael, and Michael wasn't dominating her mind. After going this far with it, it wouldn't be right not to trust Obila. So I gave her some honey and a healing potion and wished her a speedy recovery. Obila would be taken care of by Milim's people. I shared the info I got from her with the other demon lords. Now was no time to be worried about data leaks. If something happened to any of us in the meantime, it'd be too late then. That's what we all agreed on. The ensuing 2 days passed at a crazily frantic pace, of course, and before I knew it, it was time for the World Congress. Benimaru was stationed back at home, protecting Tempest as our commander-in-chief. I was bringing Ranga, in my shadow, and Ci as my bodyguards, with Diablo serving as my secretary. I felt confident that this group could handle a Feldway attack if it came along. Yo, boss. I don't think there's much I can do for you on the big stage today, but let me know if you need a hand, okay? Yom was sounding like his usual self. I didn't see Joran around, she was probably at home dealing with family stuff. Instead, Ghidorah was guarding him. I said hello back and promised to meet up with him again later. There was a bit of a dinner buffet party scheduled after today's meeting, and once that was done, I was planning to go out for a drink in the Inglesia capital with my closest buds. I had more than a little excitement in my step as I headed for the assembly hall. I met up with Masaaki at the main square in front of it. He was the real star of the day. I was here as his acquaintance and intermediary. Hey, said Masaaki, did you grow a little, or? I had gained a bit of height after becoming a pseudo-true dragon, which brought me closer to Masaaki's eye level, but now his eyes were way above mine again. Oh, you can tell. I think I did, yes, I told him. Masaaki smiled. Taking a closer look at him, I realized that his hair was now a dazzling shade of blonde. And your hair, too. Yeah, it completely changed color on me. I'm used to it now, but it was pretty weird for the first little while. At this point, it was fair to say something abnormal was going on. I wondered if I was overreacting, but then, maybe it's not so far-fetched to say that Ghidorah himself was coming back to life. Masaaki was still Masaaki, though, so I opted not to worry about it as we entered the assembly hall. I had been to this circular chamber several times before, and it was already filled with dignitaries from many nations. There was a lot of chatter, but it all subsided the moment we stepped in. All eyes were on us, but I was used to that by now, and I guess Masaaki was, too. He didn't seem the slightest bit nervous. You're really looking a lot more imposing now, I said to him. Well, sure I am. During my coronation, there was just this huge sea of people beneath me. He announced his ascension to the throne from the balcony of his castle, and that experience must have helped him mature quite a bit. You were wonderful, Masaaki, Veilgrind said, a wistful look on her face. She was here as Masaaki's associate, but she herself was as imposing as always. Her beauty went without saying, but the military uniform suited her well, too. She might have been the one attracting the most eyes, actually. As we took in this attention, Chairman Lester, bushy white beard and all, came up to us and led me and Masaaki to our seats. We were in the front row, as befitting our status, and I took the seat facing Masaaki on the opposite side of the chamber. Testarossa was in her speaker's seat as well. All the arrangements were in place, and as long as nothing got in the way, today would mark a historic reconciliation between the Western nations and Eastern Empire. Of course, having those sorts of thoughts is a warning flag in itself. And, of course, things did get in the way, but I was still blissfully unaware as I quietly waited for the Congress to begin. The hidden catacombs underneath the Kingdom of Inglesia had been dug out over the course of several centuries. Constructed in anticipation of a future attack from angelic forces, they are widely termed a labyrinth because of their twisty, intricate passageways. They also incorporate several large, open halls nearer to the surface, available as public shelters in case of emergency. But that is only the public face of these catacombs. Deeper down, there exists a secret place known to only a limited number of people. It is a darker side to the capital, A research lab that deals in the kind of evil that must never be known by the world at large. Research at this lab is handled by a team of magical inquisitors, and their primary focus is incorporating factors of monsters into the human body. It had already produced some results, boosting muscle strength 10 times over a normal human's, hardening skin until it's tougher than steel, and developing a skeleton capable of supporting these enhanced body parts. These were clearly successful cases, in other words, but in the eyes of the king, this still wasn't enough to take on the supernatural beings known as demon lords. Another failure. That guy was a lot softer than I thought. We'll need a stronger body than that if we want to incarnate a demon in physical space. The Empire's been working on weapons called battle chimeras, I heard, but the concept seems similar to ours. Yes. The difference lies in whether you're directly modifying a human body or using it as part of a chimera. The existence of medications that could induce special abilities in patients, known as medical skills, was a secret so well kept that these researchers weren't aware of it. They believed that battle chimeras were the best you could get in terms of organic weaponry, but with the right research, they believed that directly enhancing the human body would be quicker and even more powerful than creating chimeras. That's why, without even a shred of reluctance, they were conducting experiments that had seemed taboo to any normal person. Still, it hadn't been enough for them. They just weren't getting satisfactory results. They had thoroughly investigated the inherent factors of all the monsters they'd been able to capture, successfully extracting them to some extent. They were seeing their enhancement rates grow as they worked on a series of version upgrades, but now they were running into a new vulnerability, not a physical one, but a certain mental barrier. Healthy mind, healthy body, as the saying goes, so they decided that an enhanced body required an enhanced mind as well. This inspired the researchers to explore fusions with spiritual life forms, and along those lines, they theorized that borrowing the powers of demons would be the quickest approach. Obtaining demon test subjects, after all, was pretty easy. Skirmishes with demons in the northern lands were still a common occurrence, and thanks to capturing weakened demons as prisoners of war, they had procured a decent supply of both lesser and greater demons. These demons were given bodies to incarnate into, allowing the lab to analyze their internal composition, and they had already obtained some fascinating results. So how do demons incarnate themselves into physical bodies? It turned out to be a process where their magicules eat their way into human cells, remaking them so they're more amenable to magic. However, that only occurred when the demon was taking the initiative on occupying a body. If you attempted to forcibly incorporate demon force into a human body, it'd be rejected as poison. It was just too alien. Demon force obviated the need for energy intake through food, sleep, or even breathing. Your lifespan stretched out to essentially forever. It was like being reborn as a wholly different life form, and trying to control that with the will of a human being was beyond reckless. And the magic inquisitors were making another mistake. Although the power of a subject's will was important, their focus had been strictly on strengthening the physical body. The way their flawed thinking went, this was perfectly fine because the demon occupying the body would strengthen its mental aspects by itself. This led to a series of experiments that placed them completely in the wrong direction. That, and one more thing, an even more fatal flaw. By collecting and cultivating cells from a demon-incarnated body, researchers thought they could extract the cell's demonic elements and inject them into another test subject to give them demonic powers. However, a demon takes a body as their own through the power of their will. Without that, there would be no cell reconstruction, and the elements would infect the body as a poison. So this lab was conducting a long string of torture-like experiments that had no hope of succeeding. For the test subjects, this environment was like hell itself. They were certainly not choosing the best and brightest to experiment on, either. The subjects were mostly orphans and slaves, people that nobody would care about if they were gone. Criminals, too, many serious offenders, scheduled to receive the death penalty, were instead transported to this lab in secret. Rainer was gasping for breath. Despair and terror ruled his heart. He had once been the honorable head general of the English Royal Knight Corps, but now he had fallen to the point where he was a disposable test subject. Many of the soldiers who looked up to him had been killed. He was enraged by the unfairness of it all at first, but his will was broken soon enough. The help that he expected had never arrived. His family home was torn down, the Night Corps abandoning him entirely. It was no wonder, considering the crimes he committed at a previous council meeting. Using Elric, the first prince of Inglesia, as his backup, he tried to pick a fight with the demon lord Raimuru and Hinata, leader of the Crusaders. He would have been a hero if he won, but he never had a chance against them. Rainer had triggered an international incident, so it was a given that he had to pay a heavy price. He was ultimately convicted of treason, and everyone associated with his conspiracy was sentenced to death. In other words, they were being experimented on in this lab. The help Rainer had hoped for was never going to come, and now that he understood this, he spent his days dreading the moment when it'd be his turn to sacrifice himself for research purposes. Damn it! Why did this have to happen? The only reason he still kept his wits at all was because of the anger he occasionally relapsed into as he recalled it. His resentment toward Raimuru and the paladin Hinata was vast and total. "I'll make them cry, I swear it. They'll only wish they could beg for their lives by the time I'm done with them. I'll make them realize who I really am, and I'll give them the slow, painful deaths they so richly deserve." Only the intense hatred was holding Rainer's heart together. But a lust for revenge wasn't the only reason he was like this. He had been subjected to surgery to physically enhance his body, but without the usual demon-driven mental upgrades to go with that. The idea was to perform that demonic fusion only when his body had been strengthened as much as possible beforehand. Rainer, in particular, was a valuable test case, ranked over A even before all this, so the scientists down here treated him with special care. Whether you could call that good luck or not is questionable, but either way, Rainer was still alive and well, and in terms of strength alone, he had already reached a special A rating. And then, one day, the hope that was never supposed to arrive came to him. "Ho! You found it that easy to get in?" Feldway didn't really expect much from Vega when he allowed him to lead the way in these catacombs. Now he was heaping him with praise. There were 4 of them, Vega in the lead, followed by Arius, Mai, then Feldway. After that strategy meeting, they had all gone to make their own preparations. They agreed that, rather than launch the attacks at the same time, they'd strike one target first, then pummel their main objective while the demon lords were still focused on the first site. This meant that Feldway's team, charged with engaging Masayaki, wouldn't be the first to strike. No, that honor went to Fen of the 3 stellar leaders, attracting the attention of the demon lords with a flashy, dazzling rampage. He'd defeat Dagrel of the Octagram and take control of his army, an impactful victory that'd no doubt send chills into the demon lords' hearts. Jahil, Fen's fellow stellar leader, was being sent to help him out, and between the 2 of them alone, they had a force powerful enough to take down the Western nations. The main players today, however, would be Feldway's team. Their objective was to break into the World Congress, held in the royal capital of Inglesia, and get rid of Masayaki. To prevent any interference, the stellar leader Zorario was placed on standby in the sky, charged with stopping the demon lord Luminous should she attempt anything. If not, he was ordered to launch a full-scale attack on the capital at Feldway's signal. Furthermore, at the same time Fen began his attack, the insect lord Xeranus was to attack the demon lord Milim's stronghold in the former nation of Eurasania. The octagram currently consisted of 6 people: Guy, Raimoru, Ramirez, Milim, Dagrel, and Luminous. Feldway's team believed that attacking 2 of them at the same time would plunge the rest of the demon lords into panic. Of course, they had word that Raimoru, just as much a concern as Guy, was close by Masayaki, Feldway's current target. His name was on the list of attendees at today's Congress, but they couldn't discount the possibility that this was a trap. Feldway had good reason to be cautious. He'd be playing it by ear should unexpected events develop, and with that in mind, instead of entering the capital by force, he took Vega's advice and used the city's hidden passageways. This turned out to be a great idea. They found one of the catacomb exits in the forest outside of the city, and going through there provided a simple invasion route that evaded the barrier around the capital. Their luck didn't end there, either. Oh, this lab is still around? Ah, I remember it well. They experimented on me a whole bunch too, didn't they? As Vega noted, there were signs of life on the other end of the corridor, little, insignificant people from Feldway's point of view, but by human standards, they had a decent amount of strength. He rued having to deal with them, causing a scene down here was counterproductive to their aims, but quickly he realized that this was an unexpected bit of good fortune. Ah, I knew it. The guys in these cages are test subjects for the research here. Vega casually approached one of them as he spoke, not even trying to defend himself. He gave a kindly smile to the man inside. Hey, partner. How are you? He was speaking to Reiner, just when the man's heart was on the verge of breaking. What? You're not one of those damn scientists? Reiner shrank back in fear once he noticed someone in front of his cage. But then he looked up at Vega, puzzled by this stranger. Vega laughed. Looks like you're hurting pretty bad in there, huh? Who are you? I'm Vega. One of the alumni, you could say. Alumni? Sure. I got experimented on a lot in here, too. I was lucky to escape, but the memories are bad enough that I still get nightmares. Now Reiner began to see a kindred spirit in Vega. You're just like me. Yep, I sure am. So how about we bargain a bit? Wanna get out of here? Vega went right to business. Feldway, watching, didn't attempt to stop him. This operation was fully in Vega's hands, and everything had gone well so far. He'd keep a close eye on him, but Feldway didn't think it was such a bad idea to let him call the shots for now. Besides, he had another idea in mind, too. Reiner was far from the only prisoner being experimented on in here. There were nearly 100 of them, in fact, all physically strengthened and appearing to be in very fine shape. Perhaps he could use these prisoners as vessels for the mystics who had yet to be incarnated. He thought the idea over as Vega and Reiner kept negotiating. Huh? Reiner was perplexed at this sudden offer. If he was being offered rescue, there was no way he could refuse. But Vega and his gang were clearly involved in risky business of their own. He thought for a moment whether to trust them, but only for a second or two. If he refused this offer, all that awaited him was his own destruction. He'd go mad with fear and despair and likely die before too long. If Vega was tricking him, well, better that than to die the most painful of deaths in here. Help me. If you want my loyalty, I'll swear it to you with everything I have. So please, get me out of here. Vega smiled at this shouted plea. Placing a hand on the magically enhanced steel cage, he promptly twisted the bars apart, ripping them off the frame. The show of strength made Reiner realize just how outclassed he was, but even more surprising was the number of dead magic inquisitors now lying at his feet. They had been quietly taken care of by Arius. Reiner was wondering why the usual patrols weren't coming as usual. Finding out why made his face turn white. I couldn't defend myself against Inglese's secret forces, and they killed them that easily. I can't believe this. These guys are true monsters. But the thought relieved him. Now Reiner felt he had truly made the right choice. Great getting to know you, partner, Vega said. If there's anyone else in here you wanna spring out, let me know. I'll rescue all of them for you. The unanticipated offer almost made Reiner jump for joy. Yes, all of them. They're all soldiers in my service. The only prisoners in this facility were those deemed capable of surviving the enhancement process. The women and children had already been shunted over to other experiments, which had already killed them all. Reiner and the others were told that this, too, was part of their punishment. They all had nothing left to lose, so they didn't hesitate to follow Vega's lead. All right. From today on, you're all under my command. We're about to go on a rampage up in the capital above us. You're joining us, and you don't get to say no to me, all right? Yes, of course. I couldn't have asked for a better order. We all got a score to settle with this country. Reiner readily accepted the request. The knights under his command all nodded their agreement, seething with regret for their dead friends and family members. Knowing their lives were saved now only added to their fury at being subjected to these horrible experiments. At this point, there was no containing their rage, and Feldway was there to egg them on. In that case, I think I'll give all of you a little power, too. Are you ready to go, Mai? Any time. Sir Jahil just procured 100 warriors for me. Mai had already taken action, in accordance with Feldway's wishes. In just this short period of time, she had invoked instant motion to receive a small squadron of Jahil's hand-picked soldiers. Jahil wasn't happy about giving up personnel, but this was Feldway's absolute order, and disobeying him was unthinkable. And so, deep underneath the kingdom of Inglesia, Reiner and his knights were very sudden participants in an incarnation ritual. Whoever had the stronger will would take control of the body. Sometimes they would join together into a single ego, but Reiner and his men still preferred that to any more of this experimentation. In a few more moments, I can feel the power flowing in me. Thank you, Sir Vega. Thank you for not only saving us but giving us a chance at revenge. Hey, no problem. I'll lend you this, too. Go have fun with it. Reiner accepted a weapon from Vega, a knightly blade created with the multi-weapon skill taken from Aulia. It was God-class, needless to say, and now that he had taken on the power of an officer-class mystic, Reiner should be more than capable of using it. Right now, his power would rate an EP of over 1 million, and adding a God-class weapon to that would bring it up to 2. The knights under him had also been reborn as superpowers with EPs between 200,000 and 500,000, well above special A level. These unexpected reinforcements put Vega in a very good mood. Feldway was satisfied, too. This was quite an unexpected find. I doubt they're about to hold back, either. Why, they ought to be a great help to us. With a smile, he watched as Reiner and his men merrily walked out of the facility. A shuddering tremor hit Skyspire Tower. On this day, the holy void of Damargania would face an existential crisis. This looks pretty bad. Is this that guy who was out ravaging the whole planet long ago? Ultima's muttered observations rattled Veyron and Zonda, whom she had called over. I'll go check with Sir Dagrel at once. Good idea. We need to consider the worst-case scenario here, so Zonda, run over to someplace where you can get in contact with Beretta at once. Have him report back to Xion, too. The two of them immediately went on the move. If this tower should fall, the next target was clearly going to be Lubelius, where Xion was. They'd need to contact headquarters, of course, but they also needed to explain the gravity of the situation to Xion. Zonda, presumably understanding this, made no objection. There was no why, no I want to fight with you, nothing extraneous like that, thanks to his absolute trust in, and fear of, Ultima. Unlike the lower-level demons, he and Veyron were under Ultima's direct control, and thus had an insider's view of exactly what her personality was like. She had no mercy for anyone who defied her, no time to deal with anyone who went against her will. Besides, Ultima was accurately judging the situation. Zonda had already tested the area and found that it was magically sealed off. All possible means of communications were blocked, making it impossible to reach the outside world. But they were prepared for this, of course. This was a problem that came up last time, during the attack on Leon, so Rimuru instructed everyone to remain in constant contact. They were asked to reach out to each other on a regular basis, once every 5 minutes. If these updates stopped coming, it meant something had happened at that location. They'd have an easy way to quickly know if something was wrong, but Ultima must have decided even that was too slow. If that was the case, all Zonda could do was follow orders as best he could. He certainly wasn't incompetent enough to waste valuable time. So, running like the wind, he quickly disappeared. Ultima got up and bit her nails. You know, if my prediction comes true, we'd better keep the escape option in mind, shouldn't we? She'd prefer not to resort to that, but if things went from bad to worse, she was prepared to do it. So Rimuru trusted Dagral, but at the same time, he doubted him, too. Rimuru had something of a rep as a pushover. He was sometimes easily tricked, like he was oblivious to other people in a way, but the truth was that he was a sly schemer at heart. Even Ultima, Queen of Demons, had to laud him for his calculating nature. One time, Rimuru had muttered something like this. The way he kept asking for support from Veldora, even after I explained the enemy's goals. It bothered me a little. As he put it, Dagral was constantly asking for Veldora to come and support him during their Walpurgis Council. Michael was trying to obtain Veldora's draconic factors, something Dagral had heard about and presumably understood, but he still wanted to get Veldora, not Ultima. They knew each other well, that was likely the reason, and it was a good one, but something about it still weighed on Rimuru's mind. Ultima didn't think Rimuru was overthinking matters, either. After hearing his observation, she had pondered over everything she knew about Dagral, from start to finish. As a result, she came to the same conclusion as Rimuru: there was a non-zero chance Dagral was ready to stab them in the back. Besides, wasn't Dagral the son of the Mad King of the Giants? He went on a rampage with enough force to destroy the world, so Veldenava had to seal him away. She didn't know all the details behind that, but she could venture a good enough guess. This land was adjacent to Ultima's former domain, so she had ample information on him. In fact, nobody knew Dagral in more detail than she did. That's likely why Rimuru sent her over here. I'm sure he's expecting a lot from me. It's exciting to think that. With that newfound enthusiasm, she had been closely examining Dagral ever since coming to Damargania, probing to see if any betrayal was afoot. Then she found a clue. Dagral was said to be one of 3 brothers, but she had only ever been introduced to one other. The third seemed to be key to this matter, and now they were being attacked by whatever this was. A presence that seemed to resemble both Dagral and his younger brother Glazord. The Mad King? She muttered to herself, a bold grin on her face. When Veyron entered the throne room, he was greeted with angry shouting. And deservedly so. Skyspire Tower, this building constructed by the gods, had gone back into operation. The door to the heavens was now open. Originally, this tower was a divine fortress meant to protect mankind from any and all of its enemies. This time, though, Skyspire would be the battlefield. It was little wonder that the people living in this area were so upset. Even worse, the presence felt from above was a familiar one to the older giants. It disturbed them well before they could see the enemy in person. Although the giants were usually spoken of as a single species, they actually differed widely in terms of lifespan and abilities. The older ones, for example, had no lifespan at all. Strictly speaking, they could be replaced by a successor, passing their memories and powers onto them, but even this was a sort of insurance should they be killed in battle. These spares or replacements did have lifespans, but these grew longer with each subsequent generation, and even a brand new replacement could expect to live for several hundred years. Ability-wise, the older giants had powers worthy of being called godlike. Giants were, of course, large by nature, ranging from 6.5 to over 8 feet tall, but they could grow several times larger than that during battle. These well-honed bodies were where their true essence lay, and when it came to Dagral, the oldest giant of all, there was a 10-fold height difference between normal and battle mode. In other words, he could grow over 65 feet tall when he wanted to. Among the giants, there was but one person comparable in strength to, or perhaps even stronger than, Dagral. This was Fen, his brother. Dagral had 2 younger brothers. Fen, the youngest, was the kind of tyrant who retained intelligence and reason but had fully lost control of his emotions. He had been sealed away by Veldenava, and Dagral kept that seal going ever since. That was why he never moved away from this land, even as it turned into a desert. Fen was sealed in the Celestial Palace, the only real passage through Skyspire Tower. There were other methods, but those were only accessible to those with the correct key for the job. Veldenava's sister Velzard was the only one allowed to open the gate to this palace, a fact that Dagrel knew, so he didn't need to be a genius to predict this turn of events well in advance. Dagrel was now on the top floor of Skyspire Tower, peering down at the levels below him. He recalled the most recent Walpurgis Council. All those selfish demon lords were asserting themselves at the table, trying to consider everyone else's positions as they did. There seemed to be no real harmony to it at all, but strangely enough, their discussion still proved to be constructive. The demon lord Raimuru's associates had been going around putting the final touches on the magic transfer circle system just a few days ago, following the stipulation of their agreement. Things were calmer, the system now complete in time for the upcoming battle. Dagrel was impressed at how hard they worked, and the work was done perfectly as well. He couldn't have been happier with it, so he threw a grand banquet to reward the work crew. Now that only Ultima was left from that team, things felt a bit lonely. Their transfer magic circle was ensconced at the center of the tower's lower levels, almost looking like a piece of artwork with all the patterning on it. The real attraction, however, was what it did for them. The purpose of this magic circle was to help people come and go in case of emergency, but considerations had already been made for other use cases in the far future. They were pressed for time on the construction, but from Dagrel's point of view, this was already astounding enough as an achievement. If you could transport an entire military squadron at once with it right now, after all, merchants the world over would want to use it for more peaceable purposes later. Raimuru, eh? No underestimating him, that's for sure, thought Dagrel. Creating something so complex, running off the magicules in the air, but still usable by anyone, no experience required. It has its limits, but as long as you fill it up with magicules, you're fine. A much safer way of travel than having to traverse that evil desert all the time. In this abandoned and dying land, it was all he could do just to import enough food to keep his people fed. The giants couldn't live off thin air, after all. They needed enough food to satisfy their, well, giant bodies, and the younger they were, the more energy they required. Life was a wonderful thing, perhaps, but in a sense, it was a curse at the moment. Damargania exported materials extracted from the monsters in the desert, but it was fully dependent on food imports from foreign countries. It forced their young population to be constant travelers, crossing the harsh desert again and again. That's just how life was in the Holy Void. But with this transfer magic circle, they'd finally be freed from this hardship. Up to now, it was conventional wisdom that food supplies couldn't be magically transported, but going forward, Dagrel was sure they'd find a solution to this. It's almost scary, isn't it? All the pain I've had to go through, and now there's a potential way we can solve all of it. Now I won't have to go to Lubelius, hat in hand, all the time any longer. It was a tad unnerving to him, how much of a vision for the future this demon lord Raimuru had. He kept coming up with these ideas that never would have occurred to him. It was kind of amazing. He appreciated his perceptiveness, and he certainly didn't want to make an enemy out of him. But now someone was here to put a damper on his excitement. A voice, echoing in his head out of nowhere. Dagrel, my friend, it has been far too long. I'm glad to see you're still doing well. I wanted to get in touch with you as soon as I got back here, but I ran into a few things, you know. Now I'm here, though. Dagrel didn't panic. He had expected this. Feldway? I appreciate you calling me a friend, but I'm afraid you and I are enemies at the moment. I'm not in the mood for a long conversation right now, so just tell me what you want. This reply seemed to slightly disappoint Feldway. It's a pity you have to act so coldly toward me. I was hoping you could help me out a little. His pretentious tone of voice made Dagrel treat him even more coldly. For reviving Veldenava, you mean? I'm not too interested in that. I don't resent him for sealing Fen away. I owe him for granting us this land and taking care of us, but I don't think it's right for me to help with this. Feldway and Dagrel weren't exactly close friends. In fact, Dagrel lost his temper when he saw that Dino, his true friend, was being mind-controlled by Michael. He had wondered what Dino could possibly have been thinking when he heard about his betrayal, but looking back now. Really, why would that idiot sell out Tempest in the first place? It'd give him all the trouble in the world, and he'd never want that. That's why the mind control story made perfect sense to him. And it was also why Dagrel wasted no time turning down Feldway's request. Feldway was less than enthused to hear that. Whoa, I thought they called you the rebel giant. Don't tell me becoming a demon lord has defanged you. He appealed to his famously wild disposition, hoping to gain the upper hand in this negotiation. Dagrel and his two brothers were godlike giants, so wicked and fearsome that they even tried taking on Veldenava the Star King Dragon all by themselves. They were tyrannical kings, scattering destruction across the land, and many were the regions they pummeled and plundered until they were nothing but scorched earth. People called them all-powerful gods of destruction, but ever since they bowed to Veldenava, they had been far quieter. Dagrel lived a quiet life in the territory he had been given, protecting Skyspire Tower as he was assigned to. But that didn't mean he had grown meeker in nature. Even now, with Veldenava blocking most of his power, he was called the Earthquake when angered. Feldway thus thought that Dagrel would be easily provoked by a few choice words from him. But I'm sorry. The past is past, and now, I have quite a bit more hope for the future than I once thought I did. And now that I have Rimuru to thank for that, I couldn't think about betraying him. He didn't need much time at all to turn him down. Then, shooting down any further attempts at negotiation in advance, Dagrel said, "I'll see you next time on the battlefield," and shut off the telepathy-driven chat. This is getting out of hand, Dagrel thought. I never imagined that damned Feldway would actually break the seal on Fen. Is he getting back at me for refusing to cooperate? Don't let it bother you, my brother. He's a man stricken by impossible delusions. This was probably bound to happen sooner or later, I think. Dagrel and his brother Glazord seemed quite calm and composed to Veyron. It irked him. Wait. This is news to me, I think. Have you been communicating with the enemy, Sir Dagrel? Veyron was prepared to pursue this, refusing to take no for an answer. Ultima ordered him to. Unfortunately, Dagrel was about to disappoint him. No need for threats like that. You're certainly a powerful demon, but you're still weaker than me. The lack of hesitation in that reply told the whole story. Calm down, Sir Veyron, Glazord continued. My brother did receive an invitation from Feldway, yes. But he turned it down, and that's why we're in this situation right now. Veyron nodded his understanding. He had guessed this much in advance, but still wanted to try putting Dagrel on the spot. Nothing about their attitude suggested the two brothers were lying, so he decided to accept it as the truth. So why was Dagrel making statements back at the Walpurgis Council that clearly would have benefited the enemy? My great king was concerned about the many questions regarding your actions, you understand. I would like to hear a clearer explanation for that. But just as Veyron was lodging this new accusation. All right, I get it. You actually wanted to ask Rimuru for help, didn't you? You only made those statements at Walpurgis to arouse suspicions that you were involved with the enemy, yeah? Ultima, arriving here after running a little late, wasted no time with her own question, or, really, not a question but an assertion. Dagrel responded with a loud, hearty laugh. Oh, how wonderful. I'd expect nothing less from my archenemy. I'm so glad you came here, and not Carrera. He meant it, too. Carrera was more brawn than brains, she didn't really have a mind for reading into the backstory of things. If she mistakenly concluded that Dagrel was tricking the demon lords, it would have been very difficult to work around that. With Ultima, though, he was in good hands. They had been bitter enemies for so long, her tormenting him to no end, and that's why he trusted in her intelligence. With a big smile on his face, Dagrel told Ultima she was right. By suggesting he and Feldway were conspiring together, he was implying that there was a good chance he and the Holy Void would be targeted. He'd never want to be mind-controlled into betrayal like Dino, but the chance was greater than zero, so he thought fit to communicate that to them. However, Giving it to them straight would likely lead to nothing but misunderstanding, as he saw it. So he merely hinted at the possibility instead of spelling it out. So that's what it was, huh? Ultima smiled as she spoke. And I guess you got what you wanted, then? Because Sir Rimuru picked up on it just fine, too. He's a cunning man, capable of seeing through anything, and I'm sure all of this was part of his calculations, too. So don't you worry. I'm sure everything will work out. Dagral nodded at her, relieved and grinning. Did you hear that, Glazord? That's how amazing my colleague is. Anyone perceptive enough to play Clayman for a fool like that would realize exactly what I was trying to do. Dagral and Ultima really were connected at the heart, a fact that had nothing to do with Rimuru. The reality that this was rooted in a total misunderstanding had evaded their notice, but maybe they were happier that way anyway. Regardless, they had now fully reconciled with each other. Well, I better keep working hard until Sir Rimuru shows up. I am ready for your orders, Lady Ultima. I will gladly destroy any enemy you instruct me to. Ultima and Veyron, trusting in Rimuru, were ready to join the fight. Right. I think I'll kick up a little dust, too. Taking on Fen might be a bit of a slog, but I doubt anyone else can stop him, so